Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. As India Canada relations hit a rock bottom, a new video has surfaced now. This is of Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, the Khalistani terrorist who is based in America. He has issued a new threat. He has announced the new dates on temple attacks in Canada. He has said that Sikhs, the Khalistanis in Canada will, of course, take to violent means and they will not allow the unfurling of Indian tricolor Tiranga in Canada. He says that he'll shake the foundations of Ayodhya. That is the new threat that he has issued. The question that we are asking, how do Khalistanis get away? How do they have a free run in Canada? Even as they keep on issuing such threats, keep on attacking people, worshippers at a temple, and keep on giving new threats to all those people who are there in Canada and do not believe in Khalistani ideology. To discuss this, we are joined by an eminent panel. We are joined by Daniel Bordman. He joins us from Canada. He's a journalist. Welcome to the show, Daniel. We're also joined by Donald Best, who's an ex-Toronto police sergeant. Welcome back, Donald, to Mojo Story. And of course, we'll be joined by Prabhu Dayal, who's a former diplomat. Daniel, if I may start with you, are you surprised that a new threat has been issued by Pannun, or it's just the routine now? After every few days, he issues a threat and a violent threat. There can be no threat more violent than this, that he's asking people that he will disrupt proceedings at a temple on particular dates. What can be more violent than this?
Oh, we'll find out after he gets away with this, because this is the way of extremism is when you do not stop them, they escalate and they keep going. The current police philosophy in Canada is to depolice and to de-escalate and to ignore and push away and not ever confront and solve problems. So you see what the Khalistanis are seeing, what the Islamists who are seeing what the Khalistanis are seeing, what the Antifa radicals can all get away with, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing. And they've already learned that if they go into a temple and start whacking people with sticks, Patrick Brown has their back, Peel Police has their back, the entire political establishment has their back, and will lie and obfuscate and do two sides. They won't say Khalistan. You could take a Khalistani flag, yell about Khalistan, go into a Hindu temple, and start whacking people. So this is a huge, like, you think of like an egotistic dominance type behavior. Think of that. And why is he using the phraseology? We're going to shake the foundations of Ayodhya. Does that have anything to do with Canada? Is that anything to do with Khalistan? Or is that the concept of Hinduism? Right? Is that
Right.
we're going to go deep into Hindu spirituality and threaten the foundations of Hinduism and then attack your temples? Right? So we can get more and more and more and more and more bold, because this is a man who can get on his little, studio there in his basement and, threaten international air travel and get completely away with it. So why wouldn't he go and start threatening temples? And, he's trying to make it. He's using Canada and America as a base to wage a war against India. And why wouldn't he, say, okay, anywhere where the Indian government has any type of function whatsoever, I call for violence, go and attack them, because
Right.
everything he does, we give into. We've already said, if he's going to threaten temples, if Pannun threatens a temple, Patrick Brown gets in Brampton. Patrick Brown makes sure that he gets on the phone and with the Peel Police and says, it's a very bad thing. And the Peel Police work together, and then they threaten the temple and say, you need to give us 100,000, 60,000, whatever amount of money for us to protect you, because it's not a Canadian event. It's the India consulate's signing thing.
Right.
So then it's a private event. Like, this is the heckler's veto. They're
Right.
saying that anywhere that the Indian government steps foot in Canada, they're going to organize. They're going to make a terrorist threat, and then the police are going to help them out by shutting it down.
Right.
And then we're going to rinse, watch, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat until it's stopped. But you don't just terrorists don't stop You cannot reason with them. Pannun is not a
Right.
reasonable person. You cannot reason. You cannot say, well, Pannun, if we just talk with them, and maybe the certificates aren't done in a Monder and they're done in a community center, and we're don't advertise much. Do you think that would be a happy compromise, and you would tone down the rhetoric? Listen, when you're talking to Pannun, he's going to say, yes, of course, do that. And then you're going to attack the Hindu community for him. And then he's going to get more
Yeah.
radical. And he's going to do
Right.
something crazy
And
called
and and
lying.
and there has been an attack on aeroplane in the past. A flight, a Kanishka bombing has taken place, and he still goes about making those threats. And as we are pointing out, that the system protects these people, the system seems to be defend them, and that's why they get so emboldened. Now, you spoke about the police. One police officer was recently seen siding with the Khalistani protesters when they were beating up worshippers at a temple. We spoke about this, Donald Best, last time when you came on our show. He was suspended. Do you think that it has set an example, or nothing seems to have changed on the ground?
As you know, and I criticize both Hindus and Sikhs, and I criticized that officer, but mostly I criticized the police and the politicians for not adhering to the rule of law. The rule of law, of course, is that everybody's treated equally. Everybody has to obey the law, and if they disobey the law, they should be brought to account for that, depending on what law they've broken. Now, in Canada, the Criminal Code, Section 176, clearly protects religious places of worship. Whether or not there's worship going on there, or whether there's a meeting going on or a social meeting, it's all covered under Section 176. But we saw in the original episode when the Sikh extremists, the Khalistanis, including that police officer off duty waving that flag, and they attacked that temple, and they were not charged. They were not taken away. That law was not enforced. Then we saw a retaliatory attack when Hindus got together, and some of them were saying, kill the Sikhs. This is in Canada. This is incredible. And they marched to the Sikh place of worship, and they were stopped. But this was a retaliation. I wrote an article that had the police done the right thing at the first, I think it would have nipped that retaliatory attack or protest, whatever you want to call it, in the bud. Because I think that the Hindu community would have said, okay, the police are looking after this. But the police aren't looking after this. The police have constantly come down on the side of this side or that side, whatever it is. Black Lives Matter, the Antifa attacks, this latest by the Khalistanis. The police seem to take sides. And this just exacerbates any situation, because if Canadians cannot depend upon our police, well, then who are we to depend upon? So I wrote that article, and immediately the Peel chief of police blocked me on X.
Blocked you.
Yes, he
Right.
blocked me on X, and I had reached out to their media people, and I had been talking with them and received all sorts of information from them, but now I am blocked.
So, just for our viewers, that Donald Best is a former police officer. When that temple attack happened, there were videos that surfaced, and in one of the videos, there was one person, Harinder Sohi, who was seen siding with the protesters while they were beating up the worshippers. He asked some questions to the police. He gave a list of questions to them. They gave answers to him. They told him, yes, this man belongs to the police force, and investigation is underway. The person was suspended. Now, he's been insisting on the policing, on the right method of policing. But what has happened? The police chief has now blocked him on X. Right, Donald Best?
That's right, and the media relations don't respond to me. So, because as a journalist, because that's what I do now, I used to be a police officer, a sergeant, but as a journalist, I've written a few articles that are critical of the Peel Police. So now they won't have anything to do with me.
No,
Oh well.
why is it happening? Is it lack of professionalism? Is it that they are following a particular direction that's been given to them? What is the reason? Because generally police will try and de-escalate the situation. Why do they escalate by siding with one group or the other group?
I think it's because policing, law enforcement, has become political in Canada. Don't forget, we had thousands of people peacefully go to Ottawa in February of 2022 protesting against the lockdowns for the COVID lockdowns, against the injections, and against rules that prevented us from traveling from one province or going from city to city, which were unconstitutional. So the people went there, and what happened? They were trampled, they were hit, they were arrested, their bank accounts were frozen with no legal authority to do that. The police just took all their assets, froze their bank accounts, they lost their insurance, they lost their mortgage, and families were destroyed. That was the police acting like political thugs. And it's just incredible because in Canada, this has not been the way things have been. It's not the way things are supposed to be. But now, in every situation, it seems that we have politics interfering with law enforcement, fair law enforcement, and we have people in charge of police who are acting politically. And I believe this is what we have in the case with Peel Region, because clearly the Khalistani separatists all across Canada at all levels of government have had undue influence. They're only a very tiny part of the population. And yet, as many people have reached out to me, they've told me that in their riding, when they go to a provincial or a federal election, every candidate for every party will be a Sikh. Now that happens when communities enclave, when instead of spreading out across Canada, they go to one little community and they gain political power in it. And that's part of the situation here too. It's a complex situation. But the one
Absolutely.
thing that should not be happening is the police should not be taking sides and protecting terrorists.
And when that incident happened, before that also that police officer had taken part in another demonstration. Perhaps if those videos were not released or they would not have surfaced, no action would have been taken against them, because there was no choice. Once those videos were out, some action had to be taken against that police officer. But Prabhu Dayal, the point that Donald Best was also indicating too is that Khalistani seem to have infiltrated the system at multiple levels. That's why they are emboldened. Pannu continues to give threats, threatening threats after threat, one after the other, without any consequences, and they are saying that they will again stop worshippers at the temples, and they are going to resort to violence. How is it possible if Khalistani separatists have not infiltrated the system in a big way? Another pointer to that is that the conservatives cancel the Diwali party. It's not just the liberals, but it's all across the system that this thing seems to have creeped in.
Well, first of all, I would like to compliment the previous speaker, Mr. Donald Best, for his very correct analysis. He really hit the nail on the head when he said this problem has started because the police is taking sides. The police in Canada seems to have become politicized, and he rightly pointed out various examples to show what he was driving at. Now, I would like to say that Sikhs are considered here in India among the most loyal and patriotic section of our society. But there are a handful of exceptions who are extremist Sikhs. Now, Canada has become a hotbed for anti-India activities by extremist Sikhs. Uh, these extremist Sikhs are openly calling for the breakup of India and for the creation of a sovereign state called Khalistan in the Punjab region of India. Now, many extremist Sikhs, including gangsters and terrorists who belong to the Punjab area, have fled to Canada with the help of the Canadian authorities, with the help of the Canadian High Commission here. And they have been given citizenship by the Canadian government. And despite several requests by India, the Canadian government has not taken action against these anti India elements. India sent many extradition requests, but the Canadian authorities have not extradited these terrorists who are wanted by us. Now, from their safe haven in Canada, these terrorists have been involved in masterminding attacks against India. And the media has time and again reported that violent Khalistani mobs with swords and weapons, these mobs of extremist Sikhs, they have been going around looking for Hindus to attack them. And unfortunately, no action has been taken by the Canadian police because, as Mr. Donald Best was pointing out, the Canadian police is siding with these extremist Sikhs. In fact, these many sections of the police authorities there are openly supporting these radical goons and terrorists against the other sections of the Indian diaspora, but particularly the Hindus and the moderate Sikhs. So, unfortunately, the open support by the Canadian police to the Khalistani extremist Sikhs has come out in the open, as you mentioned, after a video surfaced of some police officer uh, himself attacking the Hindus at the Brampton temple, and he was siding with the extremist Sikhs who were part of that activity. Now, what is very, very sad is that there were some consular camps which were to be held in the Greater Toronto area, and these were to be held at two Hindu temples, and these have had to be cancelled because this extremist Sikh called Gurpatwant Singh Pannun has issued threats against the Indian diplomats who would be organizing those consular camps. Let me mention that the whole purpose of organizing consular camps is that the consulate officials go to distant places and help people who are Indians or people of Indian origin to get services. Now, let me mention that in the month of November, retired Indian government officials, including those from the army, are required to give life certificates. That is to say, certificates showing that they are alive so that their pension can be continued. Now, the main purpose of these consular camps was to issue these life certificates. So these consulate officials were reaching out to the community. Many of those people in the community are now Canadian citizens, but they were reaching out to them so that they could give them life certificates and those persons could continue to get their pensions. This was an act which was meant to help those people who are living in that area. But by threatening to attack these temples when the consular camps were being held, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu has harmed the people who were going to be held. And of course, he has created further problems in India's relations with Canada because the impression is becoming stronger that the Canadian authorities, particularly the Canadian police, is siding with these extremist Sikhs.
Right. If we can have that letter up, there is no choice but to cancel those camps because of the very obvious threats that are being issued. Uh, that letter clearly indicates that there is that letter that if we can have it on full screen, it clearly says that there is no other way life certificate even scheduled at Brampton Mandir by the Indian consulate has been cancelled. There is extremely high and imminent threat level of violent protest. We are deeply saddened that Canadians now feel unsafe coming to Hindu temples in Canada. Now, this is Brampton Triveni Community Center that has issued this. They have a reason to issue this letter. What happened last time? Now, this was a camp that was organized by the consulate, and Khalistani separatists came holding those flags, shouting slogans, and beat up the worshippers. Daniel, what can get worse than this? All these camps have now been stopped. There won't be any life certificates that will be given to the people who need it. That will impact their pensions. This seems to be getting from bad to worse. We know that Justin Trudeau, in a recent statement, said that there are Khalistanis in Canada, but not all Khalistanis are Sikhs. That was a cleverly worded statement because, in the same breath, he said that there are Hindu supporters of Prime Minister Modi in Canada, but not all Hindus support Modi. So that was a strange equivalence that he was drawing.
Yeah, I mean, Trudeau's clearly compromised ideologically. Whether by, I think a lot of it's natural. Like he has a natural affinity for extremists. I think Oswald Assange pointed this out. I think you see it in his choice of also who he associates with in the Muslim community. He also he started opposing moderate Sikhs. He also instantly opposed and despised moderate Muslims. Went directly to the Muslim Brotherhood. Even palled around with organization the ICNA, which publicly says Islam and democracy are not compatible and promotes sexual slavery. So these are the type of people that Justin Trudeau sees as, the people he can work with, or maybe he thinks he can moderate them. I think a lot of it's like the narcissism. I think he lives in the world created by Barack Obama in 2009, where you can hug the terrorism away and be really dynamic and oh, I'm a young, good-looking leader, being so dynamic and bucking the trend. And he's lived in this world his entire life, and it's still 2009 for him, even in 2024. So what are they going to do next? Like, what's the next step? That's up to figure out. There's going to be a next step because you can clearly see there's a pattern to undermine India at all levels. And Justin Trudeau's doing it, where he's legitimizing and delegitimizing at the same time. Taking the Khalistan movement and saying it's basically like India, Khalistan and India, two countries, right? This is a problem. But we support United India, right? And then, Khalistan, Pannun, and Modi, they're the same, right? But Modi's not a terrorist. He's the democratically elected leader of a country, which should be allied with us, right? But he's part of the international left. And the international left wants to undermine Modi, wants to undermine every leader who isn't, on board. And the geopolitics of Barack Obama's fantasy land circa 2009, right? India's, Donald Trump is back, and he's the Donald Trump of Donald Trump.
Right.
And Modi's in India. That makes him Donald Trump, but in India. We have Pierre Poilievre, who's Donald Trump, but in Canada. And then, again, none of this is actually true, but this is how Canadian media thinks. These are the Donald Trumps. These are not Donald Trumps. We make good guys and bad guys that exist in the newsroom of the CBC. And then we try and impose our fictional reality onto the reality of reality, and it doesn't go well, and it leads to chaos. So what's Pannun going to do? Well, he's done a very good job of destabilizing Canada-India relations, and he's going to find the next way to do that. So I think Pannun's in a sort of a scenario where, I don't think he thought 2 years ago he'd be able to be threatening to blow up airplanes and temples all simultaneously, right? For him, he must have thought, I must have had, at least 6 months to a year between my threatening terrorist attacks against all airline travel and then threatening terrorist attacks against all Hindu temples. But got away with one, got away with the other. So where's he going to go? Well, he's going to try and undermine the very conflict. Why doesn't he want people getting their pensions? Because he wants to create discontent among Indian Canadians here and have them feel like people don't have their back, and then undermine the relationship between Canada and India long term. So any way he can undermine the relationship between Canada and India, he's going to push. And then soon he's going to start going after, embassies that are friendly to India, that are slightly not aligned with the Trudeau government or whatever. Like, he's going to find ways to push and push and push and push and push until he's stopped. That's how terrorists work. They keep going until they stop, until they are stopped. So it's more of this. Hindu temples are going to be attacked. Eventually one of the Sikhs for Justice followers is going to not go in with a stick, but with a gun and attack a temple. That's where this is heading. So, either we get real now as a country, or we just sit back and wait and we say, is the first, we saw a pogrom in Amsterdam, and we go, in Canada, is the first pogrom in Canada, is it going to be against the Jews or the Hindus? We can sit there and watch that. We can just say, who is a roaming mob just going to, we're going to have videos of people being grabbed by their hair and women just screaming, beaten with sticks. Is that going to be because they're Hindu or Jewish? That's the question in Canada. Not are we going to stop it? Not are the police going to arrest them? The police won't arrest them. The politicians won't stop it. We will say two sides. We will give slight condemnations. The only thing is the politicians who are preparing a statement for, oh my God, pogrom is bad. Hey, there's no place here. Do they put in Jew or Hindu? That's the only question in Canada.
Also, Daniel, how is Canadian media reporting this story? We getting these inputs from Donald that Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's aide Arsh Dalla was nabbed by Canadian police. These are reports, and 48 hours since Indian media revealed this, no Canadian media has reported this so far.
Canadian media is totally compromised. 100% compromised. Mainstream media is compromised in multiple ways. You could say, do they have Khalistanis inside them? Probably. Is there money? Is there probably people from the government putting their finger on it? It's probably in all of the above. The media coverage of this narrative has been atrocious, absolutely atrocious. The Hindu Sikh temple. They don't say, they when the CBC covered the attack on the temple, they the underlying music when they're talking about Hindus versus when they're talking about the Khalistanis, different, sets an emotional tone that makes you go, Khalistan, Hinduism, right? That type of stuff. When they said, oh, some people at the temple were wearing the tricolor flag of India, but also there was a saffron flag, which is known of Hindu nationalists, which is an evil thing. Hindu nationalism was a very evil thing, but Khalistan, what the heck is Khalistan? If we're gonna juxtapose that, so when they talk about the Khalistanis attacking the temple, they are sure to give an excuse to say Khalistan temple. And according to them, they were saying that the Indian consulate was actually using the temple to spy on people for assassinations and murders and whatever. And then the crazy Hindus attacked for no reason, right? So there's the crazy Hindus have Hindu nationalist flags. Oh no. And the Khalistanis, which is that not Sikh nationalism, a Sikh homeland? I mean, I've read the Sikhs, the World Sikh Organization, Sikhs for Justice, Khalistan plan. It's a Sikh ethno state dominated by a religious theocracy. This isn't to push for self-determination. This is for a fantasy-land theocratic nation that makes no sense on paper or off of paper. But again, the Canadian media, if there's a story that's inconvenient to the narrative, they just completely ignore it. So Hardeep Singh Nijjar, one of his deputies, another member of the Khalistan Tiger Force, gets arrested. We're not going to arrest him because CBC just put an entire documentary on Nijjar, which turns him into an absolute hero. Again, glowing music, no mention of him threatening the terrorist attacks. No, not the video of him praising suicide bombings, not the videos of him and his people, putting up pictures of terrorists standing by Bindawal and Parmar and yelling Khalistan Zinabad. None of that. He was a father and he played with his kids and he was an activist and he just wanted human rights. And then he was killed. Oh no, who killed him? Right? So anything that doesn't fit the narrative, they leave out. And when they are forced to cover some of the bad behavior of Khalistan, they make sure to whitewash it by mixing in, right? If a Hindu sneezes near a Khalistani or within 500 meters of a Khalistani, well, then that's the reason for the attack. Well, the Khalistanis, you could say, didn't they plan this? Wasn't Pannun threatening this for weeks? Well, no, the violence started when a Hindu man and his child sneezed in an aggressive manner that was seen to be an attempt which people say could have caused bioterrorism and pneumonia, which is the deadliest thing on earth. So after the the Hindu attempted genocide, that is when the violence started. And you go, well, no, I think someone just like sneezed, but nope. The CBC says it was an attack of bioterrorism. So
Right.
what do we do?
You explained it in such a manner that one gets a clear picture of what is happening on the ground. But Donald Best, coming back to the issue of police, Daniel had tweeted a video a couple of days ago about a couple of policemen. They are playing with swords, some sword fight, and then there are Khalistani flags around. And you had also responded to that tweet. You had said that you don't have a problem of them playing a sport, but with Khalistani flags around, then there is a problem. If we can have, you can see that video in the corner. That is the video that Daniel had, in fact, uh, tweeted, and you had retweeted that with a comment. Can you tell us what exactly is happening on the ground? They are engaged in a sport, but there are people around with Khalistani flags. This very clearly visible.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, I have no problem at all. I've said this. I have no problem at all with these Sikh officers going to a place of worship in their uniform. I've done it. I used to pray at church on duty. I was fully armed. I'd walk in and I'd pray with the congregation. Just pick a church. I used to do that Sunday morning. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And okay, they're engaged in a sport. Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
The problem is they are backed by Sikhs holding political flags that have been associated with acts of terror. I mean, let's be clear, okay? Canada's worst terror attack was the Air India, where we lost so many people, and that was Khalistani Sikh terrorists. That's what it was. But Daniel talked about the Canadian media being fully compromised, and so it is. A couple of reasons why. I think, first of all, the Canadian media is heavily subsidized to the tune of more than $2 billion, if we include the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They're subsidized by the federal government, and it's quite clear they just do what they say. It's very clear. Now, on October 28th in Canada, there was a shootout involving Khalistani terrorists, okay? And, there was Arsh Dalla, Arshdalla, and he was apparently arrested. And this story was broken more than 2 days ago by Indian media, not Canadian media. I just checked a few minutes ago. No Canadian media is covering this story. Only independent Canadian media, not the legacy media. So it's just an example of how the media here is compromised on so many stories, and it also shows the rise of the independent media. I mean, look at us here talking now, okay? And my articles, and I know Daniel's, have had millions of readers. If we look at what we've written over the past few months about this and other subjects. So the rise of the independent media is what's making a difference here. I also want to say that this idea of the politicalization of the police is not new, and it is not confined to this issue of Hindu and Sikh politics. We had Black Lives Matter back in 2020. We had them marching throughout Canada. It was illegal, what they were doing, because it was against the same lockdown laws that the police brutalized the truckers for. But these were okay because they were Black Lives Matter. So the police and the chief of police and the prime minister came out and knelt with the Black Lives Matter protesters as they were breaking the law. And then they choose to favor this side and not that side. So law enforcement and confidence in the police cannot exist in this atmosphere in Canada where the rule of law is dead. And once again, the rule of law is that everyone is treated the same under the law. Well, the rule of law is dead, and it didn't die a natural death. It was murdered by the Canadian police and the Canadian politicians who refuse to enforce the laws justly.
Right. Prabhu Dayal, one wonders that uh, why does the system not take any action against extremists when the same extremists give a bad name to the country? Why aren't the leaders clearly denouncing what they are doing? Then one gets a sense why is it happening, right? We happen to dig out that Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the Khalistani separatist who was killed, assassinated in Canada, was actually also donating for Jagmeet Singh, the person who is a politician and close to the ruling party. Now there is that screenshot on the screen. Now this tells you that the donations have gone from Niger to Jagmeet Singh. Now, this can be one reason that they are influenced, or this is not the only reason, but there are other reasons, as we're talking, that these people have infiltrated the system so deep that it's very difficult to uproot them now. There is no choice for the system but to buckle under their pressure.
Well, the previous two speakers, who are Canadians, have very rightly pointed out that the Canadian police has been compromised because of political interests. And I'm afraid that Justin Trudeau's government has been playing vote bank politics. Because as we all know, in the last election, Trudeau didn't get a majority. He relied on the outside support of Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal, who has strong uh, links with Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, and who's himself an extremist Sikh. And for a variety of reasons connected with this vote bank politics, Trudeau felt obliged to Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal and was dancing to his tune, which, of course, included being soft on these extremist Sikhs. Now, a lot has been explained by the Canadian government in terms of freedom of speech, that we have freedom of speech. But when terrorists like Gurpatwant Singh Pannun threaten violence against Indian temples, this is what they have done. The next two targets will be Indian temples on November 16 and 17. When they threaten to attack and kill Indian diplomats who would be organizing those consular camps in these temples, then it is not freedom of speech. It is misuse of freedom of speech. And the Canadian authorities cannot ignore that. They cannot sit back and say this is freedom of speech. They have to take action against such people, because freedom of speech clearly is being misused by extremist Sikhs to further their interests and to undermine security, which cannot go unchecked and unpunished. So I feel that the Canadian authorities must take stern action against people who misuse freedom of speech and issue threats against the holding of consular camps or against temples themselves. And I think without that happening, there will not be any satisfactory solution to this very unfortunate crisis.
Misuse of the freedom of speech. Last comments before we wrap up, Daniel, starting with you.
Oh, yes. I thought, oh, just final comments. Yeah, listen, it's not going well here in Canada on this front, on extremism. And listen, it's going to be on the Canadian public to stand up this and to stop it. And we don't want cycles of violence where it's a temple for temple thing. But with the police pulling out and saying we're not going to protect the community, it's going to have to become incumbent upon us as Canadian society, and we'll have to lead an independent media, because media won't cover it, to provide some sort of social protection or community protection to these temples. Because if we don't stop this, this keeps going. Like you saw in Amsterdam, okay? You thought they planned the whole thing for days. They planned an actual Jew hunt We have the WhatsApp channels. They even plan the excuse. We're going to hang up Palestinian flags. Someone they were talking. Someone get a video of an Israeli touching a Palestinian flag. We'll use it as an excuse for our Jew hunt. And then the media, whatever, said, oh, this CBC did it too. The CBC Canadian media did the blood libel, said the Jews are responsible for this. But look, the Jews are all gone. Israel gone. They're still rampaging through Amsterdam because they're terrorists. And that's what they do. So it's going to get worse. And as the jihadis attack synagogues, that gives a green light to the Khalistanis to attack temples, which gives a green light again for the Antifa radicals to burn down more churches, which gives the Khalistanis more of a green light, which gives the jihadis more of a green light. And all of this is spiraling further and further and further and further and further out of control. And soon people are going to start to die because the police has no interest in stopping this and no tools to.
Yes, we come back to the police really not doing policing at the end of the day. Donald, last comments?
Well, that's exactly it. If the police applied the law fairly right across Canada, and they had the will to do it and the backing of our so-called leaders, I believe that many of these problems would disappear overnight. Your viewers might not know, but in the last 2 years, over 100 Christian churches have been burned and destroyed in Canada. 100. But they're Christian and no one seems to care. But you know what members of the government said? Oh, you can understand. You can understand? And it just makes me wonder if what we're seeing now, allowing the Khalistanis to attack the temples and supporting them and bringing so many of the terrorists to Canada, if that isn't part of some bigger chaos just to undermine the good of society. But here we are. Ordinary people want to go to church, they want to go to temple, and even though we have laws prohibiting people from protesting outside of religious places and from disturbing ceremonies and meetings, even though we have that criminal code, the police didn't enforce it. Why not?
Right. Last word to you, Prabhu Dayal.
Well, as again Donald Best pointed out, 100 churches were burnt. Nobody took action. Now, if places of religious worship are being attacked, then the perpetrators of those acts should be punished straight away. They should be caught and exemplary punishment should be given to them. Similarly, these extremist Sikhs who have been targeting Indian temples who are threatening to attack Indian diplomats if they hold consular camps there, these people should be rounded up and locked up. Severe punishment should be given to them, because if they're allowed a free run, naturally there'll be a breakdown of the law and order situation. Naturally these acts will go unpunished, and the perpetrators of such activities will be encouraged to do such acts. So I feel that strict law enforcement action is necessary, and all those who are guilty should be brought to justice.
Strict law enforcement action is necessary. We'll have to leave it here. Thanks so much, Daniel, Donald Best, and Prabhu Dayal for joining us today and sharing your views. Thanks to all our viewers for watching the Mojo Story.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.